Okay, so here we have a finalized unit circle. We have spent some time developing the degree measures, the radian measures, the coordinates. So now here, I just want you to see a completed unit circle with all things intact. You can pause this video if you need to copy anything down, recopy a circle because your handwriting wasn't so great, just something manageable and readable so that you're good. So pause this if you need to. Okay, the last thing I want to say is something that was at the bottom of your sheet that we haven't addressed yet. And this has to do with sine and cosine of an angle. You know from geometry in your right triangle trig unit that the sine of theta is equal to, so the sine of an angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, and that the cosine of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So using that, again, a lot of prior knowledge coming in here from geometry, I want you to take a look at this unit circle that I've drawn. So I drew a unit circle here, and I highlighted 60 degrees. So I want you to think about going to 60 degrees on the unit circle. And you already know this. You know that the coordinates there are the x value, which is 1/2, and the y value, which is the square root of 3 over 2. So my x is 1/2, my y is square root of 3 over 2. But I want to show you how this right triangle can tell us a little bit more about sine and cosine. So let's zone in on this 60-degree angle right here. I could say that the sine of 60 degrees is equal to the opposite of that angle, which if I look here, the opposite of this angle here, 60 degrees, is equal to the square root of 3 over 2 divided by the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is 1. Well, when you take the square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1, you get right here the square root of 3 over 2. So it turns out, because the radius is always 1, the y coordinate anywhere around the unit circle, the y coordinate, which will always be the opposite of the angle you're working with, is going to always be the sine of your angle. So the sine of 60 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. The sine of theta, any general angle, is going to be the y value in your ordered pair. Okay, similarly, cosine. If I do the cosine of 60 degrees, cosine of 60 degrees is going to be the adjacent side to that angle. So here's 60 degrees. Adjacent would be this 1/2 divided by the hypotenuse, which is 1. And so 1/2 divided by 1 is 1/2. So it turns out here that the x coordinate is always going to be the cosine of your angle. So every ordered pair on the unit circle has this format: cosine of theta, sine of theta. And from that information, you can find every other angle you want to find. Not every other angle, I'm sorry, every other trig function you want to find. So like, for example, if I kind of just use this space here. So if I'm working with 60 degrees, let's just say I'm working with 60 degrees. So I know now that the cosine of 60 degrees, I know that that is the x coordinate there, which is 1/2. And I know that the sine of 60 degrees is the y value, root 3 over 2. Playing off of these two, I can find the secant of 60 degrees. Secant is defined as the reciprocal of cosine. So if I take 1/2 and find its reciprocal, I've got 2 over 1, or 2. If I want to find the cosecant of 60 degrees, I will reciprocate sine. Well, that's going to give me 2 divided by root 3. And when I rationalize that, I'm going to get 2 square root 3 over 3. There are two more trig functions. We've got tangent and cotangent. So let's look at tangent at 60 degrees. Well, tangent is defined as the sine of the angle divided by the cosine of the angle. So let me come over here. I know that the sine of 60 degrees is root 3 over 2. So root 3 over 2 divided by, now when I'm doing tangent, instead of stacking the fractions on top of each other, I actually like to go old school elementary style and do divided by my cosine, which is a half. And again, from elementary school, I know that when I divide two fractions, that's the same as keeping the first fraction the same and then multiplying by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So I've got this situation, and then these 2's are going to cancel. So my final answer is just the square root of 3. Finally, cotangent of 60 degrees. Well, I can actually do it by taking the reciprocal of the square root of 3, which would be 1 over the square root of 3, and then I would rationalize. Or I can think of cotangent as being the cosine of 60 degrees divided by the sine of 60 degrees. So either way you want to do it, it's going to come out correctly. It's probably just easier to reciprocate square root of 3. So if I reciprocate that, I have 1 over square root 3. And then I would multiply top and bottom to rationalize. And my final answer would be square root of 3 over 3. But if you do out the math and take the cosine divided by the sine the way I did over here, it's going to come out exactly the same. So that's a little review of your 6 trig functions, and also why the x and the y on the unit circle, the x and the y, are always going to start you off with the cosine and the sine.